We all have the same 24 hours. But why do some manage to change the world while others barely get through Monday? I'll show you 8 time management techniques that Jim Rohn used to achieve more in a day than others do in a week. And at the end, a practical formula that changes everything. You're walking down the street. An ordinary person walks past you at first glance. But there's something in their walk, in their eyes, in their posture. They're not in a rush, yet they're not wasting time. They're not anxious, but they know exactly where they're going. And interestingly, their day is the same as yours, the same 24 hours, but they accomplish more, create more, achieve more, and while everyone around them merely reacts to circumstances, they create them. I often ask myself, what's the difference? How is that possible? And one day, I heard an answer that changed my life. Don't let the day run you, run your day. In this video, I won't just give you advice. I'll share the very principles of time management I learned myself as a broke 25-year-old kid from a farm in Idaho with no plan, no prospects, and deep in debt, and which in 5 years brought me to a stage in front of thousands. And I'll tell you this, it's not magic. It's not a secret app or the skill of a genius. It's a mindset. It's a discipline that begins with a single choice: to stop being a victim of the clock and start owning your time. Look around. People are tired, exhausted. They run all day but get nowhere. Their calendar is a constant fire. Messages, calls, traffic, random meetings, hundreds of little things that devour hours like we have an endless supply, but we don't. And you know what's worse than a lack of time? Time spent that leads to nothing. A day lived without depth, purpose, or result, because every day is your life in miniature, and if a day is wasted, a piece of your life is lost. My mentor, Mr. Schuff, taught me that. He said, "Jim, as long as you only work on your job, you'll earn a living, but when you start working on yourself, you can earn a future." And the first thing he made me change was my attitude toward time. Not money, not skills, time, because time is the platform where everything else grows. And here's what I learned. The person who doesn't plan their day is planning their disappointment. The one who can't say no ends up saying yes to someone else's goals. The one who doesn't build their priorities will be used to build someone else's. Now imagine, you're the kind of person who wakes up every day with clarity. You know what to do, why, and when. You don't run, you move with purpose. You don't waste time, you invest it. Your day is not chaos, but architecture. And every hour has meaning, every action energy, every week progress. This isn't a dream, this is a strategy. And today I'll show you 8 keys to that strategy, 8 habits that changed my life and can change yours. And at the end, a practical template you can start using tonight. Because here's the truth, time is a test of leadership. It doesn't yield to the weak, but it opens doors to those who are ready to lead. So who will you be, a victim of the clock or the master of your day? The first secret, start your day before it begins. I always used to say, don't start your day until you have it finished on paper. People often get it wrong. They think the day begins in the morning. But the truth is, the morning is either won or lost the night before. Successful people don't plan in the morning. When the world already imposes its pace, they plan in the quiet of the night when there's time to think. And if you're not doing this yet, you're simply handing tomorrow over to randomness. And randomness makes for a terrible manager. My mentor, Mr. Schuff, once told me, don't go to bed until you've decided how you'll fill your time tomorrow. I asked him, why so strict? I can just decide in the morning. He looked at me and said, that's why you're not where you want to be, because your day is already a moving train and you're still at the station. You know what I did? I started spending 10 minutes every evening. I'd sit down with a notebook and ask myself, what's most important tomorrow? Which action moves me toward my big goal? Who do I need to talk to? What habit to strengthen? What decision to make? Those 10 minutes transformed my mornings and my life, because instead of starting the day with coffee and chaos, I began it with clarity. Have you ever felt that? That difference between being ready and just waking up? It's like stepping on stage with no rehearsal or after dozens of run-throughs, confidence, momentum, rhythm. Most people wake up reacting. They check their phones, react to the news, dive into someone else's priorities. Their day is like a fire. One thing gets put out, another one's already burning, and then they say, I'm exhausted. Of course, you weren't leading, you were being carried. Now imagine a different scenario. You wake up and already know your 3 key tasks for the day. One is strategic, one is creative, one is necessary but not draining. You've already decided when, how long, and why it matters, and you won't let anyone steal it from you because you've got a plan, and that plan isn't in your head, it's on paper. There was a time when I was speaking in 4 cities a week, and if I hadn't planned my days, I'd have burned out. But I didn't just survive, I grew. You know why? Because I started my day with a win. Before I even got out of bed, I already had control. And that control was created the night before when I asked myself, did I live today the way I planned? And more importantly, will I live tomorrow even better? The power of this secret is that it's simple, but not easy. Because it's easier to turn on the TV at night, easier to scroll through your feed, easier to say, tomorrow will sort itself out. But tomorrow is a mirror of tonight. You're either the creator of tomorrow or a guest in someone else's schedule. Once I spoke in front of 15,000 people, and I said, show me your evening and I'll tell you who you'll be in a year. People laughed, but then 2 years later, a man came up to me. He said, I started writing 3 things every evening, the main goal, the main action, the main why, and I became vice president of the company where I was just a regular salesman. So let me ask you, how do you end your day? What are you leaving for tomorrow chaos or construction? Because real victory doesn't begin at sunrise. It begins at 10 p.m. when you decide that the next day will no longer be left to chance. The second secret, prioritize the important over the urgent. Don't let other people's agendas consume your goals. One day, I heard a phrase that struck me to the core. If you don't plan your life, someone else already has a plan for how to use your time. And it's true. Most people don't lose because they have bad goals. They lose because they let the urgent devour the important. I often said, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. And that's the entire difference between a successful person and a busy one. Because a successful person first identifies what's important. Only then do they fit it into their calendar. A busy person just reacts to calls, requests, meetings, trivial tasks. I used to be like that. I worked, I ran around, I did everything people asked, and yet I achieved nothing. One day looked just like the next. And the worst part, I wasn't tired from working, I was tired from scattering myself. My time belonged to everyone but me. And when Mr. Schoaf said, your yes means nothing until you've learned to say no, it hit me like a slap, but a slap that woke me up. I started observing. And you know what I saw? The most successful people weren't always the smartest, but they were the clearest about their yes and no. They didn't let the urgent replace the important, because the urgent always screams, but the important speaks quietly. And it takes inner strength to hear that voice and not give yourself away to the first person who asks. One man came up to me after a seminar and said, Jim, I'm constantly busy, but I'm not making any progress. I looked at his notebook, an endless to-do list, but you know what wasn't there? His priorities, just other people's expectations. I learned to start the day not with what needs to be done, but with the question, what brings me closer to my goal? Not what's urgent, not what's loud, but what moves me. Because if you don't do that, your day will fill itself automatically with messages, meetings, urgent requests that seem important but have nothing to do with your path. I call this the other people's schedule effect. When you're constantly responding to someone else's calls, requests, and ideas, you're not living, you're servicing. And you don't even notice how the years go by. That's how life passes, a life that could have been yours, but instead became a compromise. That's why I built a habit before taking on a new task. I asked myself, is this truly important for my direction? And if the answer is no, I decline, gently but clearly. That's not selfishness, it's responsibility. Because what is important, it's what takes you where you want to go. Everything else is noise. And here's what I'll tell you. When you start practicing this, people will be upset at first. They're used to you always being available, but eventually they'll respect you more. Because you're not just a busy person, you're a person with priorities, and that's rare. So let me ask you, what's important in your life but still unscheduled? What's been waiting for weeks because the urgent keeps stealing your time? Who decides what gets into your day, you or someone else? Because every yes you say is a no to something else. And when you say yes to everything, you're really saying no to your goals. But when you start with the main thing, everything else will either fit in or fall away. And that's freedom, because in the end, the leader isn't the one with the most to do. The leader is the one who clearly knows what's important, what's secondary, and acts accordingly. The third secret, morning gold, use the first hours for yourself or someone else. Well, I once observed how a very successful entrepreneur I knew started his day. 6 in the morning, already up, coffee, silence, a notebook, no conversation, no phone, just him and his thoughts. I asked, why so early? And he replied, because it's the only part of the day no one has stolen yet. And I understood, this is the golden hour. I did the same when I was starting from scratch. Those early hours became my secret ally in the game called success. Most people wake up late, immediately grab their phone, and before they're even fully awake, they're already plugged into someone else's world, messages, feeds, news. And in that moment, their mind isn't a tool, it's a receiver. They haven't formed a single original thought yet, and they're already reacting to hundreds of others. That's not a morning, that's a shock. I learned to start differently. Back when I was a traveling salesman going from town to town, I had a choice: sleep 1 more hour or dedicate that hour to myself. I chose me. That hour became my moment to sit down with a notebook and ask, who am I right now? Where am I headed? What one action can move me forward today? That was my inner training ground. I wasn't building muscles, I was building clarity. And you know what happened? My day started to obey me, because I entered it already holding the wheel instead of chasing it, grabbing at random tasks. Either you run the day or the day runs you. I repeated that to myself over and over, and the more I practiced morning discipline, the more clearly I saw. The morning builds the spine of the entire day. It's the time before the world's demands spread you thin, when the mind is fresh, when your energy hasn't yet drained away through small things. I call it the first investment of the day, and I ask you, what are you investing it in? Because it compounds. If you start your day with chaos, chaos multiplies. If with clarity, clarity grows. If with purpose, action becomes natural. People say, I don't have time to work on myself. But the issue isn't time, it's priority. Morning isn't about hours, it's about the first 30 minutes. If you give those to yourself, everything else will fall into place. Back then, my typical morning included 3 things. First, I read at least 10 pages from a wise book. It could be the Bible, Seneca, Hill, or even my notes from the last seminar. Second, I wrote my own thoughts, my goals, answers to the question, what's blocking my progress right now? Third, I planned 3 tasks, not 30, 3. Because if you do the 3 most important things, the day is already a win. People think, that's hard, but this isn't what's hard. What's hard is living another day in a fog. What's hard is feeling disappointed in yourself. What's hard is losing years because you were always busy but never productive. Morning is the place where everything can change, quietly, without applause, without trophies, just one choice. Give the first hour of the day to yourself, not the world. What was your morning like today? Was it yours? Because if you didn't use it for yourself, it already belongs to someone else, and that someone has a plan, but it doesn't include your dream. The fourth secret, the 70-30 rule, save your best hours for yourself, not the marketplace. I often said, time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. And the deeper I dove into the essence of success, the clearer it became. The biggest mistake most people make is giving the best hours of their day, not to themselves, but to the marketplace. Not to their dreams, but to other people's deadlines. Not to personal growth, but to relentless tasks that build nothing in the long term. When I began practicing the 70-30 rule, everything fell into place. The principle is simple but powerful. Give no more than 70% of your active time outward and reserve at least 30% for yourself, your goals, your development. This isn't laziness, it's about priority. Because if you spend your entire day working for others and then hope to build your own life in the evening when you're exhausted, you're living in an illusion. Let me tell you how I came to this realization. At 26, I had already started working at a company that valued me. I was earning decent commissions. But every evening I came home feeling empty. Why? Because I had given myself away all day. All my best thoughts, my energy, my focus, none of it went to my goals, but to someone else's organization. And while I was growing as a salesman, I wasn't growing as a person. Mr. Shove told me then, Jim, don't confuse achievement with growth. You can achieve other people's goals and never move closer to your own. It stung, but it was the truth. And that's when I began dividing my day differently. I set aside 30% of my time non-negotiable for reading, reflecting, self-preparation, visualization, and planning. These were the hours when I wasn't working, but building the foundation for the life I wanted to create. During that time, I wrote my first notes that would later form the basis of my talks. That's when I learned to structure my thoughts, understand the nature of influence, and build inner strength. And that's when I realized not everything that brings income leads to wealth. The marketplace wants your time. All of it. It doesn't ask. It just imposes one more task, one more call, one more meeting. And if you don't set boundaries, it will consume you completely. But if every day you lock in your best 30%, not the leftovers, but the freshest hours, when your mind is sharpest, that becomes your internal capital. Because it's in those hours that you create, analyze, and think strategically. Those are the hours when the ideas that change everything are born. I've seen people who seem very successful, but they're unhappy. Their life is 100% external activity, but inside they're empty. And I've seen others who build their lives slowly but steadily. They always have one rule, 30% for myself non-negotiable. Maybe it's morning, maybe it's a quiet lunch break, or an evening without screens. But it's sacred time during which they build themselves. Ask yourself right now, when was the last time you deliberately gave your best hour of the day to yourself, not by chance, not if there's time, but intentionally, with respect, with discipline? If you can't remember, you've given that time to the marketplace, and it won't give it back. So starting today, take your calendar and protect your 30%. This isn't selfishness, it's strategy. And the more you invest in yourself during those hours, the less you'll have to survive during all the others. The fifth secret, discipline. The bridge between goals and results. I often repeated, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. And the more I worked with people, the clearer it became what stops someone isn't lack of talent. It's lack of discipline. It's not that the dream is lost, it's the daily habit of pursuing it that's missing. Because discipline isn't about harshness, it's about respect for your own dream and the willingness to show up where most disappear. At 25, I had dreams, big ones, but my pockets were empty, my bank account zero, my calendar a mess, and I couldn't understand. How was it that I was working, thinking, striving, but seeing no results? Then Mr. Schaaf told me something that became essentially my first lesson in wealth. He said, if you can't make yourself do what needs to be done, no one's going to save you. That was the truth. Deep down, I was waiting for discipline to arrive. And that one morning I'd wake up and suddenly want to do everything right. But discipline doesn't arrive. It's built, not from inspiration, but from decisions. Not when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Discipline is that moment when you get up at 6 o'clock, even though the bed begs for 5 more minutes. It's when you open the book, even though no one's watching. It's when you delay pleasure now for greatness later. It's character in action. And as I've said many times, character is the ability to follow through on a resolution long after the emotion in which it was made has passed. People ask me, how do I build discipline? I say start small, a small win every day. You don't need to change everything at once. But if today you go to bed on time, tomorrow you wake up an hour earlier, and the next day you cancel a pointless meeting, you're already building a new version of yourself. Discipline is like a muscle, and like any muscle, it only grows through action. I remember planning my first seminar. I had no experience, no confidence, but I had a daily routine. Every morning working on my material, every evening repetition. And you know what happened? My fear started to fade. Not because I became braver, but because I became more consistent. Discipline destroys fear, because fear thrives in chaos. But where there's order, fear has no place. Most people want results without discipline. They want inspiration, drive, clarity. But discipline is the root of all those fruits. And here's the key. Discipline is not punishment. It's proof of self-love. If you're disciplined, it means you believe you're worth more. If not, you're allowing yourself to be diminished day by day. Think, is there something you know you should be doing but have been putting off for weeks? Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a workout, maybe it's financial planning. That's your test. Because discipline doesn't show up when it's convenient. It shows up when it's uncomfortable, but important. I often said success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. You don't build an empire in a day, but every day you can lay one brick. That's discipline. One day gives you little, but 100 of those days changes everything. So remember, discipline is not restriction, it's freedom. Because only the disciplined truly control their time, money, and results. Everyone else just reacts. And no matter where you start with discipline, you can always finish at the top. The sixth secret, the power of no. Protecting your time is a matter of character. One of the greatest lessons I learned from my mentor wasn't about what to say yes to. It was about what to say no to. Mr. Schoff said, "Jim, your strength isn't in what you do. It's in what you no longer do." And that completely changed my approach to time, because until you learn to say no, all your yeses are meaningless. The world will always ask for something. A colleague wants just a minute. A client wants to clarify something. Friends suggest a quick chat. The problem isn't them. The problem is when we lack a filter, when every request becomes a command. That's when we stop living and start serving. Our day becomes a series of endless reactions. And the scariest part, it all looks like we're doing good things. But there's a difference between kindness and dissolving, between generosity and self-betrayal. And that difference is your no, because the word no is not rudeness. It's a declaration. My time matters. My goal is a priority. My life is not for rent. I learned this the hard way. In the early years of my career, I tried to be polite. I took every call, attended every meeting, helped everyone who asked. And one day, I woke up with a sinking feeling. I hadn't made a single step forward. Why? Because my day belonged to others. I was like a bus driver delivering other people's errands, but I never drove where I was meant to go. That's when I did something radical. I wrote a list. What no longer belongs in my day. Not what do I want to do, but what do I want to stop? And that's when true growth began. Because success isn't just about what you add. Success is the art of subtracting. People fear saying no because they fear rejection. But here's the paradox. The more you give in, the less people respect you. And the more clearly you protect your time, the more they value you. Because people can sense when you have direction, not just drift. When I started speaking professionally, requests poured in daily. Come here. Can we do an interview? Can I get your advice? And in that first year, I said yes to everything. I didn't want to offend anyone. And you know what happened? I was exhausted. My message became diluted. That's when I learned to say, no thank you, I can't this time. Respectfully, warmly, but firmly. And you know what? They respected it. And I became the master of my schedule again. I said, and learn to say no with elegance, because every no to the wrong thing is a yes to the right thing. Every time you say no to a meaningless meeting, you say yes to the silence where your ideas are born. When you say no to a spontaneous call, you say yes to the focus that brings your dream closer. Real productivity doesn't start with a to-do list, it starts with a not-to-do list, with the ability to shut the door on chaos so you can open the path to purpose. So ask yourself right now, what recurring request in your life has long deserved a no? Because every yes you say builds someone else's dream. But is it building yours? Don't fear disappointing others, fear disappointing yourself, because people will forget your no. But you'll remember for years why your dream never came true. The seventh secret, action creates clarity. Don't wait for motivation, generate it through movement. I've met hundreds of people who told me, I'm just waiting for the right moment, when I'm ready, when inspiration strikes, when I have more time. And I always replied simply, that moment won't come, because it doesn't come. It's created. Motivation is not a cause. Motivation is a result. It doesn't come before action. It's born within action. It's like a bicycle you can't balance until you start moving. When you're standing still, doubt creeps in. Movement kills doubt, because it reveals direction. I once found myself completely lost. After meeting Schoff, I was inspired, but I didn't know where to start. I wanted a plan, guarantees, certainty. And he said to me, don't look for guarantees, look for motion. Motion clears the fog. So I began, small steps, book by book, action by action, not always confidently, but consistently. I realized if you wait for clarity, you'll never start. But if you start even without a clear picture, things will gradually become clear because the mind turns on in motion. Inner strength doesn't awaken in thought, it awakens in practice. Many people sit and say, I don't know what I want. And I ask them, what are you doing? Because clarity doesn't live in your head. It lives in your experiences. You don't find yourself by thinking, you find yourself by doing. For example, maybe you don't know which task truly matters to you. Start with the one that feels even a little meaningful. And as you do it, you'll feel, this isn't quite it, but it's closer. The next action closer still. And step by step, clarity arrives. Action is the foundational key to all success. That's not just a nice quote, it's my personal experience. On the days I delayed action, I lost energy. A dream without action becomes a burden. It doesn't inspire, it weighs you down. But when you act even with doubt, even with mistakes, joy appears, because motion is life. I know why people fear action. They want the perfect moment, but there is no perfect moment. There is only this one, now. And it's enough to take the first step. You don't have to see the whole road, you only have to take the next step. I used to say, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be willing to begin. That's it. Because one step taken today is better than 10 perfect ones you'll take someday. And one more thing. When you begin to act, the universe begins to respond. New opportunities, new people, new ideas. They don't come to those who wait. They come to those who move. It's like doors that only open when you step closer. So ask yourself now, what am I postponing just because I'm waiting for the perfect state? Then do something small, not important, just actionable. One call, one page, one line in a notebook. Because it's not the size of the action that changes your life. It's the consistency. Action isn't just movement, it's a statement. I'm ready to be part of the process. And once you enter the process, clarity comes, strength comes, and fear fades. The eighth secret, your calendar reflects your values. Your time reveals who you're becoming. I often said, your days are your life in miniature. What you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. Because in the end, it's your calendar that tells the truth. Not your words, not your intentions, but your real, filled, or empty day. Someone might say, health is important to me. I ask, where is that in your calendar? Another says, I want to grow. Great. How many hours have you booked this week for reading, thinking, learning? A third dreams of starting a business, but each day begins with urgent client issues instead of building something of their own. The calendar is a ruthless mirror. It doesn't sugarcoat, it doesn't lie, and it shows who we really are, not in what we say, but in what we do. And that's scary, but it's also freeing. Because when we begin to see our time as a visualization of our priorities, we can start changing them. When I first looked at my schedule from this perspective, I was shocked. I wasn't in it. It was full of meetings, obligations, travel, requests, bills, but there was no time for growth, no time for dreaming. So, you know what I did? I stopped, took out a fresh notebook, and I wrote, who do I want to be in a year? And I began to build my time around that question, not the other way around. Because you don't become successful when everything aligns. You become successful when you plan your time according to your values before the results come. The calendar is your declaration. It shows what you're betting on and what you're ignoring. I've seen people say, my family is the most important thing, but their weeks were packed with meetings, overtime, and urgent tasks. Then they'd say, kids grow up so fast. Of course. Because there was no space for family in their calendar. Not because there wasn't time, but because there wasn't the habit of choosing. Real growth begins when you sit down with your own schedule and ask yourself, what here speaks to my future, and what is just repetition of the past? Then with resolve, you cut the noise, add the meaningful. Don't wait for things to calm down, because they won't. You're either the master of your time or a contractor in someone else's project. And here's the key. You don't lack time because you're not working enough. You lack time because your time isn't aligned with who you want to become. You're pouring energy in the wrong direction. It's like rowing upstream, thinking speed is the answer. But once you adjust your direction, even less effort brings more progress. I began planning my week with a simple question. What do I want to feel on Friday evening? Pride or exhaustion? A sense of progress or regret? And from that I shaped my days. Because you don't build success in a year, you build it through a series of intentional days linked by purpose. So here's your question right now. Does your calendar reflect who you want to become? If someone looked at your past week, would they see your dream or just your obligations? Remember, your calendar is not just a tool, it's your mirror, your compass, your statement to the world. And if you don't fill it, someone else will. Now let's take a step inward, because knowing these principles isn't enough, you must test them on yourself. This is where it all begins, not with plans, but with honesty. With that moment when you look in the mirror and ask, where am I right now? Not in theory, in real life. I want you to take a mini test right now as you watch. Don't pause the video, feel each question. Don't answer with your head, answer with your gut. The scale is simple, from 1 to 10. 1 means not at all true for me. 10 means, yes, that's absolutely me. Ready? Let's begin. Question 1. How well do I control my day instead of just reacting to events? Are you the creator of your schedule or the firefighter constantly putting out urgent flames? If the day is a stage, are you the director or just an extra? Question 2. What percentage of my time is truly invested in my own priorities, not other people's expectations? Think back to last week. What was a real investment in your dream, and what was just reacting, compromising endless yeses? Question 3. Do I have a daily discipline that moves me toward my goals, even on hard days? Because hard days reveal your core. Discipline is your compass in the fog. Without it, your direction always drifts. Question 4. Do my morning hours belong to me? Or is the first hour already stolen by social media, news, other people's demands? Picture it. Does your day begin with a win or a loss of focus? Question 5. Does my calendar reflect not just my tasks, but my real values? Does it show who you want to become, or is it just a collection of obligations? Look closely. Where in it is your dream, your why, your depth? Finished. Don't worry if you scored a 4 or even a 2. This isn't a sentence, it's a mirror. And in a mirror, you can see what needs to change. Because the score doesn't matter most. What matters is what you felt. Maybe your chest tightened. Maybe you felt energy rise. That's where your growth is. That's where the doors are. And you're standing right in front of them. I've always said, awareness is the beginning of change. Awareness isn't just a thought. It's the starting point for new decisions. You don't have to change everything at once. But right now, you can say, here's where I'm strong, and here's where I want more. After watching, come back to these questions. Write down your scores. Something may surprise you. It might even hurt to realize how much time went elsewhere. But it's better to see it now than 5 years later in regret. And if even one question resonated with you, subscribe. There's much more here. Deeper topics, honest conversations, and practical tools. Because this channel isn't about picture-perfect success. It's about real change that touches real life. And please leave a comment. Which question hit you the hardest? Or which answer surprised you most? I read everything, and every response is part of our shared journey. So here they are, 8 secrets that don't just change your day, but shift the direction of your life. These aren't magic formulas. They're inner architecture, a framework on which productivity, clarity, and dignity stand. Because effectiveness isn't about doing more. It's about not living in vain. It's about not letting the small consume the great, not giving away the best hours of your life to places that won't even remember your name. I've always said, success is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. And these 8 things, they're ordinary. But how you do them changes everything. Time isn't a resource. Time is you. Your yes, your no, your silence, your action. And I ask you, does your time speak for you every day? If not, you don't need to wait for Monday. Start with the next hour. Reclaim your day. If you don't, someone else will. Life is either a masterpiece or an excuse, and between the two is a decision. And if you've read this far, it means you already have everything you need. Now the next move is yours.